Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and I'm so glad you're joining me for today's episode. Real quick, if you haven't yet, I just ask that you leave a rating and or review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. This just helps out the podcast, and of course, I love to read the reviews, hear what you're thinking about the episode, and it's just so much fun. You're also going to notice at the end of episodes on Spotify, you have a chance to answer some questions. So, not for every episode, but for some of them, I have been actually asking questions on there for you to answer in response to what you maybe learned on the episode or during the episode. So that's also a super fun piece of having the podcast and also just getting feedback from you. But how are you? I hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening. I truly woke up this morning and I was like, I have nothing to say. I'm like, I have a podcast to record and I have nothing to say. But this just goes to say, if you have something nice to tell somebody, do it, because I had a girl message me and say that she is loving the podcast, and that was truly all the motivation I needed to record an episode. I was like, okay, Bailey, people are actually listening. You need to sit down and get this done. So that's what I'm doing. I love this time, but I think sometimes getting into it can be kind of hard. I was supposed to have a guest on this week, but she was sick or had lost her voice. So you can't record a podcast if you don't have a voice. So we were going to reschedule that episode. So I had already mapped out what that episode would look like. So now I came up with a new theme, a new idea, and I'm really excited to get into it today. I'm talking about the 10 things that I've learned about holistic health that changed my life and how I view food. And these are good ones. These are nuggets that I don't share everywhere because, I obviously could. I didn't come up with these concepts on my own. But a lot of it is what I do with coaching, right? Either one-on-one or group coaching. And so these are just really good takeaways. You're going to want a pen and paper because you'll probably want to write some of this stuff down. Things that I really didn't learn until probably this last year, if not 2 years. I started coaching, I guess, about exactly a year ago. And that's when I really dived into inflammation and food and all things encompassing that. Before that, I was much more into the exercise side of things. So more of like the personal training, workouts. And I just got so bored of that. So now I'm into food. I could talk about it forever. Obviously, these aren't just about food, but about lifestyle. And it's all just so intricately related, which is why I love holistic health. But let's catch up first before we get into that. A little bit of a catch up, which I've announced on the podcast, but I've launched my group coaching program or hybrid coaching program, Inflamed to Inspired. And we start on Thursday. I have 17 women in that group. And I'm so excited. I truly am so eager to jump into that. And this is our first week. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, darn it, I missed that deadline, I will still let you into the group. But I'm definitely going to run this again. I had some people inquire about this summer. Summer's not the best time for me, but if there was interest, I would do it again. I'm really just trying to map out what I want this year to look like because obviously it's in my hands. I can kind of choose, but at the same time, sometimes that's the downside of like, oh, I really can choose. So sometimes means some months are me committing to way too much. Other months I'm not committed to maybe enough, vice versa, which is kind of the ebbs and flows of just life, honestly. I was talking to some coaching friends. They've actually both been on the podcast, Laura and Emily. And they were talking about how like last summer just felt very slow with work. And I totally agree with that. And so they were even just saying like taking June and July and just working with the clients you've got, just working on, for me, it's leading exercise classes and running Balance, which is my wellness platform with workouts and recipes and a bonus podcast episode. Everything will be linked in the show notes, but that's besides the point. But taking that time truly to just enjoy, because a lot of it is go, go, go all year. And I don't often take time to reflect and get creative. And I know I've mentioned this before, but like last summer, learning patterns in your business, I think that's hard. And that was my first year. And so last summer when I mean, I had a good client load, but at the same time, I didn't have any new clients joining. And so then that just made me feel very panicked because for me, obviously it's a business. I care so much more about the people than I do about the profit. That's just how I am. But at the same time, like I need to have people to work with to have a business. And so that was just stressful. And I didn't enjoy summer really enough. I didn't go out and spend time in my garden, which this year I'm so badly anticipating. And I want to spend so much time out there and enjoy those hobbies and obviously still be working, but actually enjoy the time that I have away from work rather than thinking that I should be doing more. Because if I wanted to do more, I could truly fill my schedule with whatever more that I wanted to add in. But really just enjoying this summer is a goal of mine. And so it was just nice to talk to them, get their input about what their patterns were with their last year of work, and to notice that they kind of aligned in some ways. And I think that's really nice to see because us as people, we instinctually have patterns. I feel like we're all so much more similar than we think, even when it comes to timelines. Like I work at a coffee shop on Fridays and Saturdays, and it's so funny, like when a rush of people will come in, it's like, okay, those 25 people all decided that they would come at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, which no, that's not an abnormal time, but it's just interesting, like how our patterns align. Even when it comes to like having a burst of like really wanting to focus on nutrition and feeling better. And then we go through phases where like, I could care less, like I'm just trying to get through the day. And so recognizing those patterns has been just really nice. Outside of that though, I guess other exciting news is we got back from Boston and all of my little seedlings are growing so well. I planted some new plants, flowers and veggies this last weekend. Some Brussels sprouts, some, oh gosh, I'm totally blanking. I don't know. It was like 12 different things, but a lot of flowers, and I do not know flower variety names very well. That's definitely something I need to learn, and I'm learning more now. I did some like sunball and some iron blue, which iron blue is kind of like obviously it's blue, but it has like little flowers coming out of it. I don't know how to explain flowers. And then sunball is like a little filler, but it's like a little yellow ball that you can add into bouquets. I got my sunflower seeds in the mail, and I also got like a bee and hummingbird flower blend. It's like a wildflower blend with some annuals and perennials. And so what I have right now is my dad has disked up an area that I'm going to start planting pretty mass quantity of flowers, hopefully, if they all turn out. But it's supposed to cover 200 square feet, this like blend. And so I'm going to do 2 rows of just those flowers because it's a huge space that I have to plant those. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to plant those there, see what comes up. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's crazy. I was scheduling client calls. I had client calls today and we were scheduling 2 weeks out. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's already April 2nd in 2 weeks, which those times when I meet with clients just come so quick. And I feel like honestly, like the 6 months that we have together, it's obviously long enough for them to get the results that they want. But for me, I'm like, I feel like I just got to know you and then you're on your own. But that's just how it goes. It goes so fast and it's just so fun. But again, I was like, oh my gosh, we're already to April. And I think I probably said that last month. I said, oh my gosh, we're already to March, because I don't know what it is about me. I just have to comment about the months going so quickly because I just feel like they are. And I was even thinking about my friend is getting married and her bachelorette party's over my birthday weekend this year, July 21st. And I'm like, 25. Ew. Like, that's fine. I always had said, though, I'm going to have like a mid-20 crisis because, I don't know, you just get to that phase where like you realize you're just not cool anymore. And it just is kind of defeating. You know, you're not like, and I don't know, I don't really read too much into it, but it's like you're not in college, you're not in high school. Like, I guess the next step is really like either getting married or having kids. Like, that's just really what life looks like now. I've not got too much going on. And when my brother talks about like college things, I'm like, I just cannot even relate to that anymore. And it just feels super weird, but it's good. Moving on to bigger and better things. It's also refreshing to know that life doesn't end after college and that there's honestly so much good that comes out of getting into a really good relationship or getting married or starting a business or whatever that looks like for you. For me, it looked like getting married, and I realized how awesome being married is. And I'm like, why is everybody not doing this? Because I just mean like the friends that I have that have been dating for a long time, and I totally get it. You never want to rush into something like that. Our situation was a little unique in that sense, probably, but I'm just like, oh man, nobody knows how good this like being married thing is. Like, it's just so fun, and living with somebody that you want to be around all the time is also really fun. And so, yeah, I don't know, just random thoughts, but life doesn't end after college. That's just what you need to remember if you're in the depths of that. I remember it consumed my whole life for a long time. And then I felt a lot of like sadness when I was out of college because I graduated a year early, and then all my friends were still in college, still hanging out, and I lived in a different city, or my past roommates were then living together in a different place. And I don't know, you just start to feel really left out. Not that I did the best job connecting with people in that phase of my life either, but life does kind of come back around. Yeah, I don't know. Just the things that you go through in those years you think are so huge, and then you realize, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. Now looking back, in the moment it definitely was, but we all evolve, we're all growing, and I think that's just something I have to remember a lot too, is that the people that I would love to be more connected with, that I don't see all the time, like they're also doing their own thing. They have their own responsibilities and things going on, and that's just how life kind of goes. But nonetheless, life is good. I guess I already caught you up on what happened when we went to Boston. That was that last week's episode. On that Wednesday when we were actually coming home is when you would have listened to that. And yeah, it was a great trip. Ate really good food. If you want more depths of that whole experience, go back and listen to last week's episode. But let's jump into the segment of how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit. So, how I'm nourishing my mind, I would say that this is actually probably, it's nothing new. Reading before bed always does wonders for me. Rather than sitting on the couch watching TV, reading before bed with my blue and green light glasses on is the best way for me to fall asleep. I'm right now reading, is it The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo? I could be mispronouncing the title, but it's along those lines. And that book is so good. I am over halfway through. I started it last week when we were on our flight home, and I am not disappointed. I've heard incredible things about it, so I'm finally reading it, and I love it. How I am nourishing my body. I honestly would say that making chocolate chip cookies yesterday was a great way for me to nourish my body. Physically, obviously, yes, but I think mentally and emotionally, like making chocolate chip cookies and not having guilt around eating the dough before you bake it, and not having guilt around eating 2 cookies after they come out of the oven, is just a really good feeling. And physically, I felt great. This is kind of a swap that I've made, which this is not 10 things that I've learned, but it's a bonus, I guess, just around food, is I really like coconut sugar. Let me start that over. So I replace the 1 cup or 3/4 a cup of white sugar and 3/4 a cup of brown sugar with 1 cup total of coconut sugar. And they taste like molasses-y. They're very like flavorful. They don't taste like coconut. I don't know how to explain it, but they're just like a very deep flavor. I feel like less than being like very flowery and light. They're just a little bit, I don't know how to explain flavor, but anyway, those are so good. That was the first time I made that in that exact recipe. I also substituted the butter or the Crisco for, I did like a 1/2 cup of coconut oil and a 1/2 cup of ghee, which is that clarified butter. Just some different swaps that I make because obviously I don't really love to do the white sugars or the brown sugar. I like coconut sugar. That's just my swap. A little bit less processed. It's still a refined sugar, but less processed, a little bit more natural. And then, well, it would be natural. And then when it comes to the butter, obviously I'm lactose intolerant. I can tolerate some raw dairy, but not a ton. And so doing the ghee and then the coconut oil is just a great swap to add in if you are lactose intolerant. So that is definitely how I nourished my body yesterday. And then how I'm nourishing my spirit is just getting back into... Actually, no, I'm going to start that over. Before I had launched this group program, I spent a lot of time in prayer, especially in the mornings, because I just got very nervous. I don't know. It's the first time I've ever done something like this. I really, really care about people's experience working with me, interacting with me. And so I just did not want to disappoint people. I didn't want to make any false promises. I wanted to be able to serve and have the capacity for all these women that are now entering my space. And I also just was like overwhelmed with the interest, but also I just didn't know, right? You can't anticipate what is going to happen. And anytime I launch something new, it's filled with so much anxiety. And I spent 2 weeks in so much stress. And so in the mornings during my Bible study time, I would just pray over all of the women that could potentially join the group, the women that join the masterclass, the experience that people have when they work with me. Like, I really just wanted to make it a joint effort between me and not neglecting my spiritual health, because that is always the first thing to go, unfortunately. And I hate to admit that, but when I get busy, I have a good time exercising because I know that's a great stress relief. I always have good food in my house, so making good food and good meals and grabbing something that is going to support my body isn't hard for me at this stage of life. But that spiritual piece and making time for that fails if I get busy and overwhelmed and stressed. And so I really try to make that just little moment of time in the morning a time for me to just be vulnerable and open with God and have a conversation about what I was experiencing, how I was feeling. And that was just it really changed how I went about doing things. And I had always heard people say that, like, when you add in that spiritual piece into a business, you're going to notice things change. And I hate to admit this, but I was kind of like, yeah, okay, but you kind of have to do your own work on, like, yeah, you could ask and pray over all these things, but you have to do your own work. And yes, that's true. I guess for me, what I learned through this experience is that it can be a joint effort, and that just having somebody to talk to, that yes, God can talk back to you and maybe show you different signs in different ways, but really it was just like me just expressing what was on my heart and just kind of like letting that be, and not as if I was if I would talk to Nate, then I would probably expect an answer. But here I just like vulnerably share what's on my heart. I spend that time talking to God, and then I could move forward with my day knowing like I just felt like a load was lifted off my chest. And so that was a really important piece, I think, of the last couple of weeks, is not letting that spiritual side of things fall to the wayside, and then only putting all my energy into work and not doing my Bible study and reading my devotional in the morning, because sometimes it happens when I start getting busy, is like I said, it's the first thing to go. So still making that a priority, even though there was a lot on my plate the last couple weeks, was really, really good for me. All right, so what do you say we get into the 10 things that I've learned about holistic health that have changed my life and how I view food? Starting off with number 1 is that 95% of serotonin is provided by the gut. So I was just talking to a client about this today, but how important it is that you take care of your gut, because if your gut is, if you've got poor gut health, if you're always bloated, always have an upset stomach, it's going to be really, really hard for you to be happy. Right? If you think of the people around you that are the most miserable, they probably have the most gut issues, right? Or maybe they've struggled with gut issues for a long, long time and never known what the source of it is. When that gut and that health of your gut is failing and you're not paying attention to it, that's when you notice like the anxiety and the depression. And I even notice that too, like if I have dairy and I feel really, really sick, like my skin dulls, and then I don't feel so confident about myself and my mood goes just terribly. My mindset is awful about myself, and I just think that those two are so closely related, and when we neglect one, we neglect the other. And so making sure that both of those are kind of on that same spectrum is super, super important. But I also know how hard that can be, especially if you have like an undiagnosed intolerance to something or sensitivity. You can be feeling miserably mentally and have no idea why. A lot of that is because your body's physical reaction to whatever you're consuming is the cause of that. And so when you don't feel good, you don't want to be happy, right? And I think when we're able to take all of those, and this doesn't mean you have to be on a probiotic or a prebiotic, but when you just eat really, really good food that doesn't make you feel like crap, you notice how much happier you should be versus if you would eat out or eat a bunch of food that upset your stomach. Okay, number 2, a negative reaction to food will happen within 6 to 8 hours after eating it. And yes, I know some people say, oh, I had ice cream and I instantly felt, the upset stomach if they're lactose intolerant. Yes, I would say that's going to be the case for some people, as it'll be a much more instant reaction. But for most people, you can trace it back actually 6 to 8 hours beforehand. And so that's where you could see if you're constantly eating something that doesn't make you feel good, it's really hard to identify that because you're like, well, I'm eating everything I usually do, but I still don't feel good. Well, until you actually strip away some of those components of your diet, it's really hard to identify what that trigger food is or even what that habit is, right? Maybe it's a habit around like drinking your coffee before you eat breakfast. So that could be a negative reaction you're having to the caffeine in your coffee, but you don't recognize that because you've never learned that you should be drinking your coffee after you eat. Food should always come first. Number 3, women need 8 to 10 hours of sleep, not the typical 7 to 8 that we were always taught growing up. And this is a more recent study. It's coming out that all of the studies done on sleep were done on men. And so when it came to knowing how much sleep we need, it was assumed that women needed the same as men because a majority of the people in that trial were men. But now as we look at women, we actually need, in some cases, 2 hours more of sleep than men do, which is, I think it has a lot to do with our cycle, right? Especially when we are on our period, our body needs a lot more rest. But even outside of that, our bodies and our hormones are fluctuating. If we think about our cycle, women have a full month, roughly, long cycle where their hormones go through all those different stages, whereas men have a 24-hour cycle. So women are like a 24-day cycle, men are a 24-hour cycle. So they feel all those emotions, they feel all those physical reactions in 24 hours, whereas we are a much more long-term or long-spectrum cycle. So that's where we need more rest, right? We need to be sleeping more. And when I learned that, I started understanding and listening to my body when I needed sleep. And so I think before that, I would just power through because, I should be able to get up at 5 a.m. and exercise for an hour every morning. Like, why is that so hard for me? Well, now I understand because my body needs more sleep, I don't need to be getting up at 5 a.m. if physically I feel incapable of doing that. I still try to get up early, but that 5 a.m., I tried to force my body to do that for a long time, probably for about a year and a half, 2 years, until we moved out to our house now and I was just burnt out. I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I'm tired of that. And I think this also goes hand in hand with the seasonal reaction that our body has. When we think about summer and even spring and summer, those days are longer. The days are getting longer. Right now, the sun didn't set until like 7:15. It was amazing. But this morning, I also know that the sun didn't rise until about 7:30. So yes, we're getting more daylight hours. So we can function with a little less sleep during spring and summer, in most cases, into early fall. When winter comes, those days are shorter, which our body then wants to react by resting more, right? Going into like that hibernation mode. That's not just you being lazy, that's your body signaling to you that it needs more sleep because there's less daylight, right? If there's less daylight, those are less working hours for you to historically have been outside doing things. Now we have lights and we have technology where we can work at any time of the day. But historically, our ancestors stopped working when it was not light outside, right? Before they had electricity. So it's like our body goes into hibernation mode for a reason. It's not you just being lazy. So I think that whole piece of rest just became very prevalent to me when I stopped forcing my body to wake up or to stay up till a certain time of the night. There was one night in Boston when I was up until way too late. It was like 1 a.m. It was like 2 a.m. I just couldn't fall asleep. And I'm like, this is miserable to be up this late and to not sleep. And a lot of it was because I had racing thoughts or I was doing too much screen time, whatever it was. But like, I was even thinking back to when I would be up, like, in college, like when you go out to hang out with people, it's like 9 o'clock at the earliest, 10 o'clock most likely. And now that's when I'm asleep in bed. And it's just crazy how your body, yes, our body's resilient, but at some point your body's going to give in and you're going to just need that sleep. So it's okay to give yourself that sleep. Number 4, you can link your cravings to signals that your body is trying to tell you. This is so fascinating to me, and this is something that has been huge for a lot of my clients that have really intense cravings. So if you're having a really intense sugary craving, that's a sign that your blood sugar levels aren't balanced. So I always recommend to add in protein first, like a pretty big chunk of protein, 20 to 30 grams of protein first. And then if you notice after having that protein and drinking water that craving is still very, very persistent, then not giving into the craving, but like enjoy it. Enjoy something sweet if your body is still having that craving. But I really think it's typically a lack of protein. So then the second piece of that, if you have a salty craving, you're dehydrated or you just haven't drank enough water that day. So drink water first, again, and then follow it. Well, I should go back. Drink water with electrolytes. So water with a pinch of sea salt or water with like an element packet, something that is going to properly hydrate you, and drink enough of it. And then follow it up with something salty if that craving persists, but in most cases it won't. Okay, number 5. Inflammation can show up in 7 different areas of your body. So these areas are your blood sugar and insulin system, your brain and nervous system, hormonal system, detoxification system, musculoskeletal system, autoimmune system, and digestive system. When I learned this, I was actually able to identify the root cause of inflammation in my body, which I knew was musculoskeletal, but it gave me a set of questions because I lead clients through the inflammation assessment. And with that assessment, we can identify the root cause of where it's showing up. A lot of people are really surprised at like hormonal or when blood sugar comes up. For me, it was brain and nervous system. And I know that I'm somebody who historically has functioned probably at a pretty high level of stress. I spent a lot of my time in fight or flight, which luckily has never really impacted my sleep, but I know it's definitely impacted my headaches and especially that brain piece, brain fog and headaches. I was like just thinking that functioning at that level of stress was normal until I looked at my level a couple of years ago in that area, and I was very shocked with my score. And so then also noticing, like for me, digestive system, musculoskeletal, and brain and nervous system. Those were the 3 highest areas where it showed up for me. And being able to identify that then allowed me to move forward, taking first a big picture approach. And then I was able to get more granular on where it was showing up and how I could treat that, which is exactly what I do with clients. And I just really was the test subject first, and then I started working with others doing the same thing. That was so interesting to me though, because I really thought that inflammation was just inflammation and that you couldn't really pinpoint it on anything because obviously we have such a complex body and a complex system, but we have 7 different systems that are complex. And when you're able to answer questions based off of a series of symptoms that are most prevalent when there's inflammation in that area, it's just super interesting. So that was just a huge, like my mind was blown moment. Number 6, sourdough that has been proofed for 24 or more hours has broken down the gluten to the point where it's barely detectable, or if you use a whole wheat or rye flour, it'll give you an even lower level of gluten. So this is not to say that people that are celiac should be consuming sourdough. Please do not take that, because you will still have probably an adverse effect to it. But with gluten, because of that whole fermentation process, that gluten has been broken down. And so that's where I try to proof all of my loaves for 24 hours or more if I'm able, just because I really want it to be easy for my body to digest. That's why a lot of people are doing sourdough these days. It's kind of a craze. It's just kind of funny how that happens. But the reason is because our bodies, and people are noticing, are digesting it better. And we're less bloated after consuming bread because there's just less gluten content, and it just makes us physically feel better. It's also fermented, which we know now. Fermented foods contain good bacteria, which are great support for your gut. So all of that is just so connected. And when I was able to start making my own sourdough, I became a total geek about it. And I just thought that that fact was so interesting, and that it all made sense then why people were saying that sourdough is gut friendly. Number 7 is consuming local honey can improve your allergy symptoms, because the pollen collected and naturally found in that raw honey contains the plant species in your area that are causing your allergies. Some people notice this works a lot better than others. I would typically do like a teaspoon of honey 3 times a day instead of taking like an allergen pill. Obviously, if you are feeling really negative symptoms of allergies, do what you have to do, but I just thought that that is such an interesting fact. And you want to make sure that it is raw local honey, because when honey has been boiled down, a lot of the nutritional benefit has actually gone. So like if you go to the grocery store and you look for raw honey, you're going to notice it's a lot more expensive than if you go to the grocery store and just get whatever is in the little bear. They're like the cheapest honey you can get. I always get a raw local honey if I'm able. And a lot of small grocery stores typically carry like maybe a small farmer in your area's local honey. I know that even in our little community, we have that too. So you should be able to find some if you look for it. If not, get connected with a honey or bee farmer. Is that what you'd call it? But anyway, that fact was super interesting. And I don't get allergies very bad, but I also notice like, I guess I could totally deep dive into the whole honey thing. I need to honestly have somebody on to talk about honey. So if you know of anybody, send me their name, because there's just so many things about honey. Even like if you have a burn on your skin. So like when I'm making sourdough, if I take out the Dutch oven and I burn myself, I just put some raw honey over that burn, and it's like, not that it numbs it out, but like I don't feel a burn anymore. Rather than using ice and all of those things we think are just going to help, like it doesn't ever help me. Raw honey was perfect, and it worked so well, and it's worked every single time I've done it. So another bonus tip about honey, and again, if you know anybody that has bees, I want to talk to them. I want to have them on the podcast, because there's so much that I think we're underestimating about the use of raw honey. So number 8, drinking lukewarm water or lemon and sea salt helps your body better absorb the iron in your food. So if we think about iron, we have ham. Oh, I just hate pronouncing things on here, because I know, guys, I'm so bad at it. It's HEAM, ham iron. That source of iron is actually very easy for your body to digest. So if we think about animal products like eggs, chicken, pork, beef, turkey, our body is going to absorb that iron fairly well. But then when we have non-ham iron, again, if you know how to actually pronounce that and you're just cringing, I apologize. But anyway, our body has a harder time absorbing that type of iron. So that's going to be the iron that is in your plants. So we think of like, oh yeah, leafy greens are high in iron, right? Well, yes, but our body has a hard time fully absorbing that. So by doing that, and either doing like lukewarm water and sea salt with lemon, or doing even like a glass of freshly pressed orange juice, that is going to help your body then absorb the iron in plants. Along with this as well, during different phases of your cycle, you're going to notice that you feel very low in iron, which can lead some people to think that they're anemic or that their body's not making enough red blood cells. Well, if you allow your body to better absorb the iron that you're having in not only the meat sources, but in the plant sources, it can help those symptoms along. So you actually notice that you don't have that deficit maybe in iron that you thought you did, or you could maybe stop taking that iron supplement, which I took for a long time until I realized I was having too much iron and I felt very, very dizzy. So obviously we're all so different and it's going to be different for you than it was for me, but I just thought that fact is so interesting. Another piece about lemon and water is that it also improves digestion by increasing the amount of gastric acid that you have in your gut to break down food. So a lot of people or a lot of clients that I have that have acid reflux, they've been avoiding the more citrusy foods or the apple cider vinegars or the lemon juice because that's acidic, right? It's very high acidity, which makes sense. But what we're learning now is if you actually have that with water and sea salt, and you have that before you eat your food, not too much that you feel waterlogged or irpy, but if you just do enough, you're actually increasing the amount of acid in your stomach, which helps your body digest food. So you notice less bloating, less constipation. And I think we underestimate that a lot of like lemon and water. I always just, my mind goes to when you go to a restaurant and they give you lemon and water. I'm like, there has to be a reason that they're doing that now. You know, like maybe, yes, it's just become habit for most people and most people don't know why they give you lemon and water. But if we think historically, I'm going to guess that it all stemmed from helping your body better absorb the food that you're going to consume. So if you have the option, get lemon in your water at a restaurant, but do not look up the stats about the bacteria on the lemons because I've also done that and you don't need to spiral into that. So just, you know, especially if you're at home, do some lemon and water. You could probably trust the cleanliness of cutting up the lemon that you have, but that is something that I do every morning. Especially, you know, obviously, I guess I shouldn't say every morning. I do that on the mornings when I remember, which is most mornings. I try to add water, lemon, and sea salt into my morning routine before I actually eat any food. Okay, number 9 is that you can't heal a body that you hate. And this is something I am continuously learning because if you listen to last week's episode, you know I'm constantly on a journey of healing my relationship with food. Right now, I'm at a really good point, but that doesn't mean that's always the case. I sometimes look in one mirror and I'm like, I just don't like what I see. I look in another mirror and, I'm like, okay, this is fine. You know, like there's so many things that go on in my own mind, and you might be able to relate to this, that make it really hard for me to appreciate my body. But when I talk to more people that are struggling with health concerns, or if I even think back to my own journey of like when I would cry and wake up in the middle of the night crying because I was in so much pain, I hated my body at that point. And I think a lot of us do, right? Our bodies are failing us. We're like, why is my body failing me? This isn't right. This isn't normal. I'm so young. This shouldn't be happening. And you start to really dislike the body that you have. But it was until that I felt truly loved by somebody, as in my spouse, and learned what it felt to be loved regardless of what you look like, regardless of anything, any component, right? I knew I was loved. And that is what allowed me to then actually start healing my mindset around my physical body. I started to stop hating my body and treating my body like I hated it. I stopped counting calories. I stopped exercising for hours, 7 days a week. I stopped trying on 600 different outfits and being so ticked off because I hated how everything looked. Not saying I don't go through phases where some of those things start coming up again. But for me, that was when I found true healing, is when I actually started. I mean, there's so many things, I guess, that lead to having what I call true healing. But a big piece of that was actually learning to appreciate my body and appreciate that my body is able to heal. The fact that 4 years later, I'm not living with chronic pain is insane, considering I tried so many different things and none of them worked, right? So to be at this point in time, I should truly be grateful for the body that I have because I'm not in pain anymore and I truly at that point in time didn't know that that would be a reality. I thought that I would have had back surgery already. Even now, right? I remember being 18 talking about how, well, before I think about having kids, like maybe I should just do a back surgery because I can't even imagine, the strain that that's going to put on my back. And now to be at a point where I don't even have to think about surgery being an option. I know I talk about that stage a lot, but like that's crazy. And so to look in the mirror and constantly hate what I see and hate my appearance, and like that's not benefiting me, and it's not benefiting my body, it's not benefiting my mind, it's not helping anything. And I think nipping those thoughts when they come to mind has been I'm not going to say it's helped me maybe switch the mindset, but it's at least kept me from spiraling into a state where I don't want to be, right? And so if you really, really want to appreciate your body, I think you have to go through a phase where, and you don't have to, I guess I shouldn't say you have to go through a phase where you're so miserably uncomfortable and you don't like what you see, because my hope for you is that you never get to that point, right? Or that you've never been there. But at the same time, if you do get to that point or something really terrible happens, and again, I don't wish that on anyone, but how are you going to respond if right now, as your body is happy and healthy, you still don't appreciate it? And so when you're able to appreciate your body, maybe it doesn't mean you love everything about your body or your mind, but when you're able to appreciate what it's doing for you, I think that's when you can start to truly start healing. I would say, yes, maybe my healing journey started 5 years ago, but I don't think I truly felt like my relationship with food was actually healing or my relationship with exercise was healing until about 2.5 years ago. And so, we think of that. Okay, I spent a lot of time being ticked off at my body for not doing what I wanted it to do, or for maybe limiting me from exercising how I wanted to, or from dancing anymore, right? Like all of those things I was so mad at. But if you don't work on that mindset piece and actually learn to appreciate your body, why would your body do anything to support you? Like you're just in that cycle of hating it and then starting to heal and then hating it again because something happened and then trying to heal. And it's just that endless cycle. So that is number 9. I have a lot to say about that one. I could, again, talk about that forever. But moving on to number 10, the quality of food you consume matters so much more than the quantity or the calories in your food. I know I've definitely talked about this one a lot, but when I stopped counting calories and I focused on the quality of my food, I noticed that physically my body, I guess thinking about that, I was so afraid that if I stopped tracking my calorie intake, that I would gain a lot of weight because I would have no idea what I was eating. But that was a phase of my life when I actually then stopped calorie counting and I started paying attention to what was in my food and the quality of my food. And my body physically didn't change because my body learned to, it digested the food better, right? I learned how to make meals that were healthier, in a sense, is what we would call it, I guess. I call it anti-inflammatory, meaning it didn't have all those components that were irritating my body or causing inflammation in my back or causing gut issues, because I learned dairy was a main culprit of that. When I actually identified that piece, I was able to also then start to find freedom around food, because if you think about, sugar-free, and I've talked about this in the past, but sugar-free foods, okay, well, they're adding sugar alcohols to that. So getting sugar-free, them adding sugar alcohol is actually going to make you more addicted to that food. So you want to eat more of that food. So yes, it's lowering calories, but there's a reason you can't put the granola away after you've had a serving of it, because it has the sugar alcohols. There's no real sugar in there. So you just want to keep eating it and eating it and eating it, and you have a hard time stopping. So yes, calories are lower, quality also lower. Whereas if you would just get like a purely Elizabeth granola, that's my favorite brand, and I do 1 serving of that or even half a serving of that on my yogurt toast in the morning, and I feel so satisfied, so full. It's because they use real food. Everything on the back you can pronounce and identify and picture, right? And so learning that quality matters so much more than calories is huge. Even if something is higher in calories, but if it's a whole food, your body is going to appreciate it so much more than if it was something super processed, lower in calories, because again, like what nutrients is your body actually getting from that product? We get in such a stage of being so obsessed with calories, and it allows us, or it causes us to neglect eating real food because real food maybe has more calories in it. And that's not always the case, but I saw this reel today and it was like, growth is me understanding that if I make any food with whole and high quality ingredients, or whole foods and high quality ingredients, it's considered healthy. And that could not be further from the truth. Like, it doesn't mean it's going to be free of calories and that you can eat as much as you want, but it means if you make a pie with real butter or real lard and local produce that you've picked and then you've kind of canned and made your own whatever concoction. All I'm saying is if you made a pie from scratch, 100% from scratch, didn't buy any pie filling or any pre-made crust, it was 100% from scratch, you would be able to have a slice of that and feel satisfied and feel content and feel no guilt, or at least you should. Whereas if you were going to go to like a Perkins and get a slice of pie, it's going to contain so much crap. The amount of calories is also going to be higher, which if that's something you're looking at, you're going to notice, but you're also going to eat a slice and then you're going to be like, oh, I could really have another. And I could probably have another after that because I'm actually not satisfied with just that little piece. And I just really think that that was such a huge like aha moment for me. And probably one of the biggest pieces of all of this is like, pay attention to the quality of your food, not just your food, but of your beverages. Not to get off on a tangent, but I saw a post, my mom actually sent it to me today, of the top energy drinks that are causing people to be rushed to the ER. You want to know what one of them was? Celsius. And nobody wants to hear it because they cater towards more athletic type people, the fitness people. They want you to think that it's a better option to pop, when in reality, it is not very much better for you than any of the other crap that's out there. Monster was another one. Starbucks espresso shot drinks was another one. I think it was like Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee espresso drink was another. And just seeing that, it makes me realize like you just become much more aware of what other people around you are consuming, which this is not me ever criticizing what people do, because I think people think that I judge what they eat because I do this for a living. And that's never the case. Like, I'm never judging what you're consuming, but I think when I see a lot of people consuming things with no understanding of actually like how harmful it can be to your body, that's when it just like absolutely hurts my heart, because we weren't set up to succeed. And that's something that nobody can feel guilty for if they're not successful, because we weren't really set up to succeed when it comes to food. There are 7 to 9 corporations that own all of the food in the grocery store shelves, with the exception of any local products that are there. Like, these huge companies are making our food, and we are taught to believe that everything on the package means, like, if it says something, oh, it's sugar-free, follows the keto diet, low calorie, that's a health halo. We think, oh, that's a great product. And then you look at the ingredients and they filled it with all the other crap that is in every other product. So really, I think that's why I'm so passionate about this, and why I just went on a spiel about this 10th thing I've learned for probably the last 5 minutes, because I would just want people to be aware of what they're consuming, what they're eating, what they're drinking. And that's not to create any fear in anyone, right? I think there's like that fine balance of enjoying what you have around you, right? That's not to say I don't enjoy fun foods, is what we maybe would call them. I don't think it's fun anymore, but more of like the highly processed Cheetos or Chex Mix or whatever it is, right? Or, oh, those little Gardello things, whatever. Besides the point. I do enjoy those things. It's just not all the time like it used to be. And when I learned what was in my food, that food no longer became fun and enjoyable because I knew it wasn't really benefiting my health. Whereas if I make something from scratch, I know I physically feel so good when I eat it or when I drink it. And overall, my health is improving because I'm just aware of what I'm eating versus just looking at the headline on the package and thinking it's good for me. So all of that to say, quality matters. Calories, I shouldn't say they don't, but they don't. And I really just hope that you feel supported when I talk about things like this. It's never meant to shame you for things you're eating or make you feel guilty for what you're eating. I think I'm in a position where I really just want to help educate people on what they're consuming. And I think sometimes it can come across a little preachy, and I just don't mean for it to. I just genuinely care about people's health, and it's something I just can't really get away from. Even where I work on Fridays and Saturdays, I work at a coffee shop, and even there, it's people will say, well, Bailey, what should I get in my coffee that aligns with what you know I can eat? And it's yes, you're right. I want to help you. And I don't really know you, and you're not even a client of mine, but I'm still willing to listen to your story and willing to help you. All of that to say, reach out if you need anything. If you have any questions over what I talk about, if you need extra support, I'm here. I do want to listen to what's going on. If you feel like you've been to people and they didn't truly listen to what was going on for you, your health issues, your struggles, please know that I genuinely do want to hear from you. And don't feel like you have to go about it alone. And this healing journey can actually be really enjoyable. It doesn't have to be miserable and full of a lot of suffering and restriction and frustration, because I think that was what a lot of mine consisted of, and I just don't want that for you. So with that, let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So dear Lord, just thank you for today. Thank you for it being the first day of spring, that new life is on its way, that things are warming up, that people's moods are improving, that seasonal depression is behind us. I just ask that you be with whoever is listening to this episode, and that they truly feel supported, and that they feel encouraged to move forward and approach their health journey a little differently, and try to appreciate the body and the vessel that you've given them, and that they take the steps, the very gradual steps that they need to find true healing, and that they feel supported along the way by not only the people around them, but by you. I also just want to thank you for this podcast and the opportunity that I've been given to connect with so many different people. And I'm just so grateful and so lucky that I get to call this a part of what I do day to day and week to week, and that this just finds the right people, that this podcast finds the right people who need to listen to it, to want to hear what I have to say. And I just thank you so, so much for them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourished with Bailey on Instagram. It's Bailey Seaton on Facebook if you'd like to connect there. Otherwise, all the other ways to reach out to me or connect with me will be in the description of today's episode. But with that, I'll talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.